Have you ever wondered what it takes to unlock the secrets of the universe, even when your own body begins to fail you? Imagine being told, at just 21 years old, that you have only a few years left to live. Stephen Hawking's story didn't begin with fame, black holes, or best-selling books. It began, quite quietly, on January 8, 1942, in Oxford, England. He was born exactly 300 years after the death of another scientific giant, Galileo Galilei. Some would later call that a cosmic coincidence, fitting for a man who would come to redefine our understanding of time, space, and the universe itself. Stephen grew up in a highly intellectual but modest household. His father, Frank Hawking, was a medical researcher, and his mother, Isabel, had studied at Oxford herself, a rare accomplishment for a woman at that time. Though they didn't have much money, books filled their home. Dinner conversations often drifted into science, politics, and ideas that soared beyond the walls of their kitchen. Stephen had a curious mind from an early age, but he wasn't a prodigy in the traditional sense. He wasn't the top of his class or the boy who always knew the right answer. In fact, he struggled with handwriting and found school life rather dull. Teachers noted that he was bright but lazy, often more interested in tinkering with gadgets than following classroom instructions. But there was one thing that truly captured his imagination: how things worked. As a child, Stephen loved to take apart clocks and radios, even if he wasn't always able to put them back together. This fascination with mechanics wasn't just a phase. It was a sign of a deeper interest in the laws that govern everything, from machines to the cosmos. Stephen's curiosity began to take shape in the form of big, philosophical questions. He often asked things like, "Why does the universe exist?" or "Where did it all come from?" These were not typical questions for a young boy, but Stephen was not a typical child. He was inquisitive, thoughtful, and a bit of a dreamer. In his early school years, he wasn't particularly outstanding academically. Some of his classmates even gave him the nickname Einstein, not because he was brilliant at the time, but because of his awkward manner and quirky way of thinking. Still, that nickname would one day feel prophetic. As he grew older, his academic potential started to reveal itself more clearly. Stephen's real breakthrough came during his teenage years. He attended St. Albans School, where he began to stand out, not for rote memorization, but for the way he thought. He was analytical, creative, and had a unique ability to see connections others missed. He didn't always follow the traditional path of study, but he excelled in subjects that demanded logical reasoning and abstract thinking. Mathematics and physics began to draw him in. They were subjects that allowed him to think freely, to ask big questions, and to search for answers in the structure of reality itself. However, when it came time to apply for university, his father wanted him to study medicine. Frank Hawking hoped his son would follow in his footsteps and pursue a practical, stable career. Stephen, on the other hand, had no interest in medicine. He was far more fascinated by the mysteries of the universe than the workings of the human body. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Stephen would apply to Oxford University to study natural sciences, a path that would allow him to eventually specialize in physics. Getting into Oxford was no small feat, but Stephen impressed the admissions panel with his sharp mind and calm confidence. At just 17 years old, he began his undergraduate studies at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Oxford was a new world for him. The halls echoed with tradition, the lectures were rigorous, and the competition was intense. At first, he found the academic system rather easy. He didn't have to work as hard as some of his peers to grasp complex ideas. He could often solve problems in his head without writing much down. He coasted through the first couple of years, enjoying social life as much as academic challenges. Stephen joined the rowing team, not as a rower, but as a coxswain, the person who steers the boat and commands the crew. His light build and sharp decision-making made him well-suited for the role. Rowing became an important part of his life. It gave him a sense of camaraderie and responsibility that balanced his intellectual pursuits. Yet beneath this relatively carefree university life, deeper questions continued to occupy his thoughts. He wanted to understand the universe at its most fundamental level. He was particularly drawn to theoretical physics and cosmology, fields that dealt with the origins and nature of the universe. But at the time, these areas of study were not seen as particularly practical or popular. Despite this, Stephen felt a strong pull toward them. He wanted to understand the fabric of reality, the forces, the particles, the laws that govern everything from stars to atoms. By the time he was nearing the end of his studies at Oxford, it was clear that Stephen had a remarkable mind. He had managed to get through the entire undergraduate course with very little written work, relying mostly on his intuitive grasp of complex concepts. But he also knew that if he wanted to dive deeper into the universe's mysteries, he would need to continue his studies. So he applied to Cambridge for a PhD program in cosmology. This decision would mark the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter filled with extraordinary ideas, incredible breakthroughs, and unimaginable challenges. What Stephen Hawking didn't yet know was that the path ahead would test him in ways no textbook could prepare him for. His journey from this point forward would become one of the most inspiring stories of science and of human spirit in modern history. Cambridge, with its ancient libraries and world-class scientists, was a dream come true for Stephen. He arrived eager to immerse himself in the world of cosmology, hoping to find answers to the grandest questions of existence. He was assigned a supervisor, Dennis Sciama, one of the pioneers of modern cosmology. Sciama's guidance would prove crucial in shaping Stephen's intellectual path, encouraging him to challenge existing theories and think boldly. But while Stephen was stepping into one of the most exciting academic periods of his life, something unsettling was beginning to unfold. He had started noticing changes in his body, subtle at first, but increasingly concerning. He would sometimes trip for no clear reason. His speech began to slur, and everyday tasks took longer than usual. At first, he ignored the symptoms, attributing them to clumsiness or overwork. But as they became harder to dismiss, his family and friends grew worried. Finally, at the age of 21, Stephen went in for medical tests. After a series of examinations, doctors delivered a diagnosis that would change everything. He had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. It's a rare neurological disease that gradually paralyzes the body while leaving the mind unaffected. The prognosis was grim. Doctors told him he likely had only 2 to 3 years to live. Stephen was devastated. In the prime of his youth, with a brilliant future ahead, it seemed as though everything was collapsing around him. For a time, he withdrew from his studies. He spent days lost in thought, questioning the meaning of his life and whether it was worth continuing. He described this period as deeply dark and full of despair. It was not just the fear of death, it was the fear of being forgotten, of becoming irrelevant before ever reaching his potential. But then something changed. During this bleak time, he met a young woman named Jane Wilder. Jane was lively, optimistic, and full of compassion. Their bond grew quickly, and she offered the hope and support Stephen so desperately needed. Their relationship gave him a reason to live. He realized that even if time was short, it could still be meaningful. Stephen once said that after being told he had only a few years to live, he began to appreciate life more than ever. Every moment became precious. He returned to his studies with a new sense of urgency, not just to learn, but to leave a mark on the world before his time ran out. Against all expectations, his condition progressed more slowly than doctors had predicted. Though he began to use a cane and later a wheelchair, his mind remained as sharp as ever. And now, more than ever, his mind became his most powerful asset. He focused on questions that didn't require laboratory experiments, but pure thought. This led him to explore the deepest mysteries of the cosmos, black holes, singularities, and the nature of time. His PhD thesis tackled the question of whether the universe had a beginning. Building on the work of Einstein and others, he collaborated with mathematician Roger Penrose. Together, they developed new theorems about singularities, points in space where the laws of physics break down. Their work suggested that the universe and even time itself had a definite beginning. It was a revolutionary idea at the time. Many scientists believed the universe was eternal, with no starting point. Stephen's research helped pave the way for the Big Bang theory to become widely accepted. Despite the physical limitations ALS placed on him, his ideas reached farther than ever. He was becoming known in academic circles not as the man in a wheelchair, but as a brilliant mind reshaping cosmology. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Jane and Stephen married in 1965. Their love, though tested over time, was a pillar of strength in these early years. They began a family together, and Jane took on the role of primary caregiver while Stephen's career took off. It was not easy, there were many challenges, but they were determined to build a life together. Stephen's condition continued to deteriorate, but he adapted with remarkable resilience. When he could no longer write equations by hand, he developed ways to do calculations mentally or with the help of assistants. As his speech became harder to understand, he used technology to stay connected to the world. Eventually, he would rely on a computerized speech synthesizer. With just a few movements of his cheek, he could select words and form sentences. This voice, robotic, mechanical, would become iconic. Through it, Stephen Hawking would go on to explain the most complex ideas in the simplest of terms. He never lost his sense of humor. He loved to joke, laugh, and challenge assumptions. Even in the face of unimaginable obstacles, he never stopped being curious. Looking back, it's hard to imagine the world of science without Stephen Hawking's voice in it, both literally and figuratively. His determination to continue, despite all odds, was nothing short of extraordinary. And at the core of his journey was a burning desire to understand the universe. Not just how it works, but why it exists at all. Stephen once said, "My goal is simple. It is a complete understanding of the universe, why it is as it is, and why it exists at all." And he pursued that goal with everything he had. The second chapter of his life had begun in tragedy, but it would unfold into one of the most remarkable intellectual journeys in history. By the late 1970s, Stephen Hawking had already established himself as one of the most promising theoretical physicists of his generation. His work on black holes and the origins of the universe had not only captured the attention of scientists, but had also begun to draw interest from the public. One of the key turning points in his career came with a groundbreaking discovery. Stephen proposed that black holes weren't entirely black. Instead, they could emit radiation. This idea went against everything physicists believed at the time. According to classical physics, nothing could escape the gravity of a black hole, not even light. But Stephen combined quantum theory with general relativity, something no one had successfully done before. The result was the theoretical prediction of what would come to be known as Hawking radiation. His theory suggested that black holes could slowly lose mass and eventually vanish. This was revolutionary. It challenged the traditional understanding of space, time, and the conservation of information. Many physicists were skeptical, but the math was sound. This single idea connected two of the most important theories in science, quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of gravity. It opened the door to a deeper understanding of how the universe works on both the smallest and largest scales. As his scientific reputation grew, so did public curiosity about his life and ideas. Stephen began giving more lectures and interviews, and his unique presence, confined to a wheelchair, speaking through a machine, made him instantly recognizable. He didn't look like other scientists, and he didn't speak like them either. But when he explained black holes or the nature of time, people listened. He had the rare gift of turning incredibly complex concepts into language that ordinary people could understand. He believed science belonged to everyone. In 1988, he published a book that would change his life forever. It was called A Brief History of Time. The book aimed to explain the origins and fate of the universe to a general audience. It asked questions that had puzzled humanity for centuries. What is time? Does it have a beginning or an end? Can we know everything that exists? To the surprise of almost everyone, the book became an international bestseller. It stayed on the Sunday Times bestseller list for over 4 years. Despite its complex subject, millions of people bought it. Some finished it, others didn't, but owning it became a cultural statement. Stephen Hawking was no longer just a scientist. He was a celebrity. He appeared on television shows, met presidents and popes, and was referenced in everything from academic papers to comedy sketches. His voice synthesizer became iconic, and so did his mischievous smile. But with fame came pressure. People expected him to keep delivering ideas that would redefine science, and his physical condition continued to decline. Still, Stephen never lost his drive. He continued to explore new questions about the universe, focusing on topics like time travel, multiverses, and the unification of physics. His public appearances became more frequent. He appeared on Star Trek, The Next Generation, played poker with Einstein and Newton in a dream sequence, and later made cameo appearances on shows like The Simpsons and The Big Bang Theory. Stephen understood the power of media. He knew that by embracing pop culture, he could bring science to people who might otherwise never encounter it. And he did so with humor and grace. He once said, "Life would be tragic if it weren't funny." Even as his muscles weakened and his ability to speak became more limited, his influence only grew stronger. He mentored students, advised researchers, and spoke out on global issues like climate change, artificial intelligence, and space exploration. He warned of humanity's vulnerabilities while also encouraging hope. He believed our destiny might lie beyond Earth and often spoke about the need to become a multiplanetary species. Yet at his core, he remained focused on the big questions. He wanted to understand what happened at the beginning of time and what might happen at the end. His life became a paradox, a man whose body was almost entirely immobile, yet whose mind traveled through the universe. He once remarked, "Although I cannot move and I have to speak through a computer, in my mind I am free." This sense of intellectual freedom inspired millions. For students, he was proof that disability did not mean inability. For scientists, he was a guiding light in the darkest corners of cosmology. And for the world, he was a symbol of what human determination and curiosity could achieve. As the 1990s turned into the 2000s, Stephen continued his work with unrelenting focus. He collaborated with top physicists, gave TED Talks, and appeared at international conferences. His vision of science was not just about formulas and theories. It was about human meaning. He once said, "Look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Try to make sense of what you see and wonder about what makes the universe exist." These were not just words. They were the way he lived his life. His work had already reshaped physics, but his voice, his attitude, and his perseverance helped reshape the image of what a scientist could be. Stephen Hawking had gone from a young man given 2 years to live to a global icon whose thoughts traveled beyond galaxies. But he wasn't done yet. More discoveries and reflections lay ahead, and his story was far from over. As Stephen Hawking entered the later stages of his life, his influence continued to stretch far beyond the scientific community. He was no longer just a theoretical physicist. He had become a global ambassador for science, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. Though his body continued to weaken, his productivity and determination remained astonishing. He held the position of Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at the University of Cambridge, the same chair once held by Sir Isaac Newton, and used his platform to further both education and scientific inquiry. In public, Stephen often delivered lectures through his speech-generating device, drawing in thousands of listeners. Audiences were captivated not only by the substance of his ideas, but by the man himself, a figure who defied all expectations. His lectures touched on everything from quantum gravity to the nature of black holes, but he also addressed broader philosophical questions. Why are we here? What is our place in the universe? Can science one day provide a complete explanation of everything? These were questions that connected with people far beyond the classroom. He believed deeply in the value of science literacy and often warned that misunderstanding science could lead to dangerous consequences for society. In his later years, Stephen began to speak out more openly on global issues. He warned of climate change, unchecked technological advancement, and artificial intelligence. He cautioned that, while these developments held great promise, they also came with profound risks. He encouraged collaboration and international cooperation, arguing that survival depended on our ability to work together as a species. He urged governments and institutions to invest in education, research, and space exploration. Stephen also held strong views on human potential. He believed we were capable of incredible things if we used knowledge wisely. He once said, We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star. But we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special. Despite his heavy schedule and deteriorating health, Stephen continued to publish books aimed at making science accessible. Collaborating with colleagues and family members, he released titles like The Universe in a Nutshell and The Grand Design. These books, like his earlier works, were infused with clarity, curiosity, and wit. He was a master of explaining mind-bending theories in a way that sparked wonder rather than confusion. Stephen also dedicated time to young audiences. With his daughter Lucy, he co-authored a series of children's books blending scientific concepts with adventurous storytelling. The idea was to ignite curiosity at an early age and show children that science wasn't just about equations. It was about exploring the mysteries of the universe. He believed that no one was too young to start asking big questions. His books encouraged children to imagine, investigate, and believe in the power of their own minds. As his fame grew, so did the demand for his presence around the world. He traveled as often as his condition allowed, giving speeches and meeting with students, scientists, and heads of state. He received dozens of honorary degrees and awards. Though he never won a Nobel Prize, a fact often debated, his contributions were recognized globally. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. He also became a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, bridging his work with broader philosophical and spiritual discussions. Despite all these accolades, Stephen remained grounded. He often joked about his fame and took pride in not taking himself too seriously. He made appearances in music videos, lent his voice to animated series, and even allowed his life story to be told on the big screen. In 2014, the film The Theory of Everything brought Stephen's life to a global audience. Based on Jane Hawking's memoir, the movie portrayed his early years, his diagnosis, their relationship, and the personal sacrifices behind his public achievements. Eddie Redmayne, who played Stephen, won an Academy Award for his performance. Stephen himself praised the film for its honesty and emotional depth. It was a reminder that behind the brilliant mind was a deeply human story, one of love, struggle, ambition, and resilience. In private, Stephen faced the daily challenges of living with ALS with remarkable strength. He had a dedicated team of caregivers and assistants who helped him maintain his independence as much as possible. His relationships were complex and not without pain, especially as the demands of fame and illness placed strain on those closest to him. Yet through it all, he kept working, kept asking, and kept inspiring. Stephen once said that his expectations were reduced to zero when he was diagnosed, and that everything since had been a bonus. He lived with a sense of wonder, a sense of humor, and an unshakable will to know. He believed that no matter how difficult life becomes, there is always something you can do to succeed. That belief carried him through every challenge. As the 2010s unfolded, Stephen remained active in science, communication, and advocacy. He never stopped thinking about the future, even when his own time was running short. And though his voice was generated by a machine, its message resonated deeply around the world. He spoke for those who felt unheard and showed what it meant to truly persevere. He once concluded a lecture by saying, "Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet. Be curious. And however difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at." Those words were not just advice. They were the embodiment of his life. As Stephen Hawking's life approached its final decade, he continued to inspire awe not only through his scientific insights, but through the sheer persistence of his will. He was now a living legend, yet he never stopped questioning, never stopped reaching. While many would have slowed down, Stephen intensified his engagement with the world. He gave interviews, appeared in documentaries, and addressed large audiences with messages that combined rigorous science and deep humanism. He often reflected on topics that were once considered speculative, even fantastical. Ideas such as the multiverse, time travel, and the simulation hypothesis began to enter public discussions, and Stephen was right at the center of them. His voice, with its unmistakable robotic tone, had become synonymous with cosmic wonder. When he spoke about the birth of the universe, or the ultimate fate of reality, people from all walks of life paid attention. He addressed questions like whether time had a beginning, or whether humanity might one day transcend its biological limits. Though his body had long betrayed him, his mind was untethered, soaring across theoretical dimensions. Stephen also took bold stances on the future of humanity. He cautioned against placing too much trust in artificial intelligence, suggesting that superintelligent machines could one day surpass our ability to control them. He didn't argue against technology, but for careful stewardship. He believed that as our tools became more powerful, our wisdom needed to grow even faster. He spoke about the fragility of life on Earth and the importance of space exploration. From his point of view, becoming a multiplanetary species was not science fiction. It was a necessity. Stephen partnered with ambitious initiatives aimed at deep space discovery. One of the most notable was the Breakthrough Starshot project, which proposed sending tiny spacecraft to the nearest star system, Alpha Centauri. The idea was bold, even audacious, but that was Stephen's nature. He always reached for the impossible, not because it was easy, but because he believed knowledge must never be limited by fear. Throughout these years, he continued to write, lecture, and debate. He released his final popular science book, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, where he shared thoughts on everything from black holes to God. It was a distillation of his wisdom, accessible and profound, aimed at readers of all ages and backgrounds. In it, he reaffirmed his belief that the universe could be explained by the laws of science. Stephen remained unapologetically rational. Though he respected different worldviews, he placed his trust in evidence and reason. For him, the true beauty of the universe was that it could be understood. He emphasized that science was not just a body of knowledge, it was a way of thinking. A tool for overcoming ignorance, for navigating uncertainty, and for finding meaning in a vast and complex cosmos. Even as his health declined, he kept working. He remained engaged with his research team, supervised doctoral students, and participated in public discussions whenever he could. His energy seemed to defy biology. It was as if his curiosity fueled a different kind of life force, one that existed beyond muscles and nerves. In his final years, tributes from around the world poured in. He was celebrated not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of intellectual courage and endurance. He received accolades, honorary doctorates, and standing ovations wherever he appeared. Yet he stayed humble, always redirecting attention back to the ideas rather than himself. He had no use for fame unless it served to inspire curiosity. And in that mission, he was remarkably effective. His journey also began to be studied by medical experts. Living with ALS for over 5 decades was unprecedented. Doctors had no clear explanation for how he defied the disease for so long. Some speculated that the early onset of the condition and the care he received played a role. Others suggested that his powerful sense of purpose might have been a contributing factor. Whatever the reason, Stephen had long outlived expectations, and he did so without compromising his intellect or spirit. As time passed, he continued to reflect more openly on his life. In interviews, he spoke about his regrets, his joys, and the lessons he wished to share. He regretted not spending more time with family in his earlier years. He acknowledged the emotional toll his fame and condition had placed on those close to him. Yet he never expressed bitterness. Instead, he maintained a sense of gratitude for life, for discovery, for the chance to contribute something meaningful to the world. He once said, "It would not be much of a universe if it wasn't home to the people you love." That sentiment summed up his outlook in the later stages of life. In his final public messages, Stephen encouraged people to keep asking questions, to stay curious, to never give up on understanding, even when life becomes hard. His legacy was already secured, not just in textbooks and lectures, but in the minds and hearts of those who had followed his journey. Scientists, teachers, students, thinkers, and dreamers all carried something of Stephen's story with them. He had become more than a man. He was a beacon. And even as his physical voice grew quieter, his ideas spoke louder than ever. On March 14, 2018, the world received the news it had long feared. Stephen Hawking had passed away peacefully at his home in Cambridge at the age of 76. His death marked the end of a remarkable chapter in human history, but his voice, ideas, and influence continue to echo through time. The date of his passing held a poetic symmetry. It was Pi Day, a celebration of one of the most important mathematical constants, and also the birthday of Albert Einstein. For many, this felt like more than coincidence. It was as if the universe itself acknowledged the departure of one of its most devoted students. Tributes came from every corner of the globe. Scientists, world leaders, artists, students, and everyday people all shared what Stephen had meant to them. His story had touched lives far beyond the lecture halls of Cambridge or the pages of physics journals. He had shown the world what it meant to pursue truth with courage and humor, what it meant to live a full life even when faced with extreme physical limitations. He turned his personal challenges into a universal symbol of resilience. Stephen Hawking had reshaped the way we think about space and time. He had given us new ways to imagine the universe, not just through equations, but through wonder. His funeral, held at Great St. Mary's Church in Cambridge, was attended by family, friends, colleagues, and admirers from all walks of life. The bells rang out as a final tribute to the man who had listened so closely to the music of the cosmos. Later that year, his ashes were interred at Westminster Abbey, placed between the graves of Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin. It was a fitting resting place for a man who stood alongside them in the pantheon of great scientific thinkers. Even after death, Stephen had one more message to share. A recording of his voice was beamed into space, directed toward the nearest known black hole. It was a symbolic gesture, a final outreach to the universe he had spent his life exploring. In his recorded words, he spoke of unity, of peace, of the beauty of our shared existence. He reminded humanity to look beyond differences, to embrace curiosity, and to treat life as a precious opportunity. The legacy Stephen Hawking left behind is not just a collection of scientific papers and best-selling books. It is a call to think deeper, to question boldly, and to never underestimate the power of the human mind. He inspired a new generation of scientists, not with promises of certainty, but with invitations to explore the unknown. He showed that disability is not a barrier to greatness, and that a passionate mind can travel farther than any rocket. His theories continue to influence modern physics, from the study of black holes and quantum gravity to the search for a unified theory of everything. Researchers still wrestle with the questions he posed, using tools he helped develop. But perhaps more importantly, his life story continues to resonate. It reminds us that brilliance can shine from even the most unexpected places, and that the search for understanding is a lifelong human endeavor. Stephen once said that the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, but the illusion of knowledge. He championed humility in learning, urging people to keep pushing forward no matter how much they think they know. He taught us that the universe is a vast, unfolding mystery, but that every step toward understanding is a triumph. And in doing so, he brought the stars just a little closer to Earth. Today, Stephen Hawking's books are read in classrooms and homes around the world. His story is taught not only as part of science education, but as part of life education, about perseverance, curiosity, and daring to dream. His image, voice, and wisdom continue to appear in documentaries, films, and digital archives. Through them, he speaks to new generations, encouraging them to ask the same question he always did. Why? Stephen's children, Lucy, Robert, and Tim, have continued to honor his legacy through science education and outreach. His former students carry forward his research, expanding the boundaries of knowledge he spent a lifetime advancing. There will never be another Stephen Hawking, but there will be millions who follow in his footsteps, inspired by the example he set. He once said, "Remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet." That message, simple and profound, may be the best guide we have, not just in science, but in life. Stephen William Hawking proved that even when time seems limited, it is possible to make an impact that stretches beyond lifetimes. He didn't just study the universe, he became a part of its story, and that story continues. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the extraordinary life of Stephen Hawking. From his early days of quiet curiosity to his rise as one of the most brilliant scientific minds of our time, his story reminds us that the human spirit is capable of reaching beyond any limit. Stephen Hawking didn't just explore black holes and the origins of the universe. He redefined what it means to live with purpose. Through his courage, humor, and relentless curiosity, he showed us that the power of thought can overcome even the most daunting physical challenges. His life is a shining example of resilience and imagination. Whether you're a student, a dreamer, or someone facing your own challenges, may his legacy inspire you to keep asking questions, keep seeking truth, and never stop looking up. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more lives that have shaped our world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We bring you inspiring narratives that connect language learning with powerful storytelling. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.